continue forward. Revolution. Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Crazy. Millions of people are listening. Thank you very much, Nahal. And you are listening to the second hour of Dave and Mackie's Sharing Setup. We're going to talk about Nazism and the occult roots of Nazism, as well as the Third Reich, Hitler, and all the usual suspects. Do donate if you can. This is Listener Comment Radio. Alrighty. Now, last time.
Show 575.
That's the one. It's 575, 570, and 500. That's a lot of shows. It's actually it's like an anniversary, like a diamond anniversary. Look, last week we almost finished an article which was put together by the Museum of Tolerance, and is really associated with the Zeeman Wiesenthal Center as well. So it's interesting to get a view, or point of view, I should say, from that side of the fence as well. And the article, or the paper even, it's quite a long paper, made a fairly strong point, or several strong points, in favor of Hitler having been influenced by the occult undercurrent, and not so undercurrent really, in Germany at that time, starting with the late 19th century. Now, I want to finish with the last paragraph, or start rather. Finish the article, but start with the last paragraph that we couldn't share with you last time, which will nicely round it up. This paper began with a discussion of Hitler's racial ideology and its parallels to Blavatsky's esoteric thought. Our examination of the Ariosophy of Guido von List and Lanz von Liebenfels and the Thule Society described the possible channels by which theosophical thought might have reached Hitler and helped to determine his own racial ideology. Considerably more research remains to be done to show specifically how Hitler and other Nazis came into direct contact with esoteric philosophy, and more important, what the ramifications of this new information are. The lack of originality in Hitler's thought is apparent, but Hitler's true originality was his ability to translate ideas into reality. His racial ideology, derived in part from perversion of esoteric thought, did, after all, become racial genocide. So, more research is needed, yes, to firm up the foundations that have been laid by other researchers, but I think it is safe to say that Hitler and his movement were deeply influenced by metaphysical and esoteric thoughts and movements within Germany and Europe, or the world in general at the time. The idea of ancient races, ancient technology, purity of race, a sort of fall from grace as well, sort of the biblical fall when we kicked out of Eden and all that stuff, that sort of all gets wrapped up in there. And it's important. It's important. It's also important because he very quickly started to prosecute all other mystery schools, including the Freemasons. He put them in camps. Not just Freemasons, though, but other
Knights Templar as well, I think, right?
Yeah, everybody. In fact,
Everybody.
Pretty much anybody who was dabbling in what he, I believe at least, thought of as his domain.
Mm-hmm.
His domain, his and the party's domain. We are the carriers of the truth. All you others, at best, have a perversion of the truth.
And that was because he basically recreated the origin of the German people, right?
But look,
and
yes,
that spoke volumes to where his intention was later, in hindsight, right?
Completely. So what he tried to do, Blut und Erde. So and the German look. Sorry, we have to wind back just a little bit here. In the world, there are very few. There are very few true nation states. Okay? I want to explain what I mean by that. A nation state is a country that is united in almost all aspects of its existence. Culture, language, history, mythology, all of these things. But there are only very few of those. What? That's not true, Mackie. There's lots of them. No, well, no, there aren't. There's only probably 2 or 3 that are truly like that. France is one, believe it or not. To some extent, Great Britain and Switzerland. Most other nations had to create their mythology, right? Especially new nations. And new nations are, for example, Germany. What? Yes. Germany as a construct didn't exist before the 1870s. Didn't exist. There was like a whole bunch of German little, countries, and this and that. And they weren't united at all. Not on purpose, not in outlook. But in that time frame, the late 19th century, they did unite. And this mythology, I think, was necessary to give Germans this unifying bond. All the German tribes, and that's what I mean by Blut und Boden, which means blood and earth, really, right? The blood, of your ancestors that has soaked into the earth and made it yours, if you will. Japan, same. Japan had to try really hard to come up with a cohesive mythology.
Even though there were giants in the north of Japan.
Yeah, and the Ainu. The original people of the Japanese islands were Ainu. They were Caucasian, believe it or not. There's still some left. So it's really hard for nations to come together. And I want to show you what happens when they fall apart. So the Soviet Union, as well as Yugoslavia, I want to give you just as cases. But we're going to even look at the Sudan in modern times. But so they tried really hard. The Soviet Union, as well as Yugoslavia, tried to really hard to create this mythology, this one nation. We are one, like Yugoslavia. We're all Slavic peoples, Bosnians and Herzegovinians and Serbs and Croats and etc., right? We're all this one entity. We are the greater Slavic people. Because Yugo just means great. So the greater Slavic nation was Yugoslavia.
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't stick.
No, because everyone's giving each other a side eye, right?
That's pretty much it. As soon as Tito died, it all fell apart, and we saw what happened in the Balkans in the 90s. Soviet Union, same thing. You had this big Russian conglomerate, and you had again Slavic peoples that tried to come together. Not all of them Slavic, but the vast majority. And so there's a language connectivity, right? So there was also a cultural connectivity. So it's not like these people don't have anything in common, right? It's just not enough. And the mythology is not deep enough either. It just isn't deep enough. Now, in Germany, Bavarians hate Northern Germans, and Northern Germans hate Bavarians. Okay, in where I come from, in the Rhineland, they would call people Saupreußen, which means it's not a flattering term for the Prussians, which are sort of to the east. Right. So, is the hate as deep as it is for the Balkan nations? No, it's not. So the Germans aren't at each other's throats. They're not. But there are significant differences culturally, as well as linguistically, between the German nations. So how do you combine? How do you make Germany great that way? How do you do it? So Bismarck tried it. He started it, and then Hitler tried to continue it. So you have to invent this mythology to some extent. I mean, not everything was invented. Some things were, and most people don't know this, but France and Germany used to be one nation. Okay, under Charlemagne, which is Charles the Great, Karl der Große, it was one nation. French and German peoples were one people, about 1,000 years ago, one people, right? And then he died, Charlemagne, and the empire fell apart. In fact, the only nation left which was founded by Charlemagne originally, I think it's the last one, is Andorra. I don't know if you know Andorra. It's in the mountains between Spain and France. Tiny little country, but its claim to fame is that it was one of the. I think it's the last remaining nation that was actually founded by Charlemagne with special dispensations. Right? It fell apart though, right? So the French and the Germans became quite hostile to each other, right? In fact, terribly so. If you look at all the wars that have been fought, they didn't really like each other very much at all. So what do you do? So Hitler, who himself is not even German, but Austrian, right? And after World War I, he goes, "Oh man, what's going on here? I mean, Germany's destroyed, Austria is destroyed, sort of, because they were there with them, with the Germans, and they didn't fare too well. They were defeated, and these mythologies arise, right? Such as the Dolchstoßlegende, which is the knife in the back of the German and Austrian troops by the bankers at home, the Jewish bankers. The Jewish bankers stabbed the army, German as well as Austrian army, in the back, and that led in part to the defeat of 1918 and the terrible Treaty of Versailles. Dreadful treaty. If you're trying to make peace, if you do nothing that was done in Versailles, you're on the right track. You're doing the right thing. Yeah. But again, Hitler. The thing is this. So Hitler he actually had a number of insurmountable tasks, because people didn't really hate Jews in Germany. In Poland, yes. In Russia, yes. Mostly in Eastern Europe, the Jews weren't really well liked. Austria hated Jews. Austria was very anti-Semitic. Very. Germany, though itself, not really. Not to the extent that other nations were. In fact, up until the 1880s, 1890s, it was a good idea for Jews to go to Germany. That was a good idea, right? Because it was fairly open, and they didn't really kill Jews in Germany.
They didn't really kill them at that point, yeah.
Yeah. So it was really hard. So you had two things. One, you had to create one mythology to fit all Germans. Right? Two, he had to vilify the Jews in the process for his own reasons. And he accomplished both tasks by employing this Aryo-sophistic racial ideology, right? Of this Aryan race, which was a higher kind of human being, which had, lost its way because it had mixed its blood with all the lower races, namely the Jews, right? And that led to the downfall of culture, which is created by spirit, as Hitler put it. See, the whole thing is actually really complex. This Nazi ideology is not an easy thing to understand. You really have to understand philosophy, and you have to understand history, and you have to understand a whole bunch of stuff before you even begin to understand what it is they're talking about.
And recognize the lies.
Well, good luck with that, right?
No, I know, right?
But Hitler did try to find concrete proof for this theory, right? He did send people out to look for these artifacts, esoteric and otherwise.
Oh yes.
And he was he was. He actually, as part of the Habsburg regalia, he was in possession of the Spear of Destiny. Now, what's the Spear of Destiny? Now, the Spear of Destiny, allegedly, is the spear of the Legionnaire Longinus that stabbed Jesus in the side on the cross. That's the spear. That's what they say. That's at least the legend. And it somehow made its way to the House of Habsburg, which was the Austrian royal house, and became part of its crown jewels, if you will, right? So the whole collection. Hitler then comes to power. Boom, mine, thank you very much. And legend has it that when the spear of Longinus fell from the wall, Hitler's army started to lose. Believe it or don't, I don't care. But the point is, he collected these artifacts, right? And he sent his people out to collect more evidence and more artifacts to bolster his theories. Right?
Even venturing to the South Pole.
Completely. Absolutely. Looking for Atlantis, looking for a civilization that predates the last ice age, etc., etc., etc. And this is stuff that actually happened, right? And people like to play that down. Now ask yourself why that is. Because the thing is this, when I was at uni almost 25 years ago now, I put a paper forward because I was doing politics. I was doing political studies at the time. And my lecturer, she was fantastic. She was great. If only could remember her name. But she knew. She actually was an expert on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. She had met Benjamin Netanyahu even back then, and spent some time in Israel. And I cannot for the life Leanne Piggott. She was fantastic. I think it might be Dr. Leanne Piggott now, but she was great. One of the best lecturers I've ever had. And I said to her, well, for one of the last papers I think I wrote for her class, I said, well, I believe that the state of Israel only exists because of the Holocaust. And she goes, okay, that's interesting. Because without it, I don't think anybody would have even lifted a finger, including the Jews outside of Europe, to help European Jews, take over what was then Palestine. And not only that, I think the Holocaust only came about because Hitler was trying to prevent the second coming of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Because they owned at the time the Temple Mount.
Yeah. And now bear with me here for a second. So the Christians believe Jesus has been here. Okay? So Messiah, but he went but everybody's waiting for the second coming of Christ.
Yep.
Right, which was prophesied. Now the Jews are still waiting for the first coming of the Messiah. Okay? So, but the point here is that it would only happen if there is a state of Israel. Now, the prophecies are very clear. When there's a state of Israel, or rather the Messiah, right, or the second coming of Christ, or whatever you want to call it, he will take his people and lead them back into Israel. So the state of Israel will be created under his authority. Okay, now you have to understand that Hitler was brought up Catholic. And I mean really Catholic. So he understood Bible prophecy. He understood all that stuff. He was well versed with these things. And the funny thing is that she said, "Yeah, write your paper." So I did. And she says it's a great paper, but it's lacking some key information. Blah blah. So I did well. I scored pretty well in the paper, but she said, "Well, you just have to show a few more proof points." And so I was hunting the literature. Now the literature now exists, and in fact this paper we just read to you from the Museum of Tolerance goes a long way toward underscoring my paper that I wrote 25 years ago.
Wow,
which is great. But my point is that Hitler was deeply motivated by the metaphysical, by the esoteric, right? He saw himself as having been chosen, and who knows why, right? And he talks about the next incarnation of men, the next level of human beings, I guess, Superman, we call them, right? That and they terrify him. He was steeped in this stuff, and to him, I really believe, to him, getting rid of the Jews was to stop the second coming of Christ. Right? Because he was not a Christian. He wanted to bring back the original Nordic religions. That's really what he wanted to do. Okay? Because he believed that those were the original Aryan religions. Right? Whereas, of course, Christianity, and you can argue until you're blue in the face, is actually based on Judaism, as is Islam, which is really funny because they're all trying to kill each other now. But Christianity grew directly out of Judaism. And I think that's probably the one thing that Hitler hated as well. But he wasn't confident enough to ignore the prophecies, right? You know, what? Okay, so I start my religion, so I bring back Thor and Odin and all that. That's wonderful. But what if that Messiah comes?
I'm stuffed. That's right.
What if that happens, right? And don't forget, the Holocaust, the word Holocaust means burned offering. It's a Jewish word. It means, or Hebrew word, it means burned offering. It's an offering in the temple. For what? And why did they call it Holocaust? Why did the people call what happened the Holocaust? No, I mean, really.
Yeah, good question.
Right?
Mm.
And honestly, I don't know. I don't know. Why was it called that? Why was it called the Holocaust? Now, was it an offering? To create the state of Israel? Because what it means, a sacrifice in which the offering was burned completely on an altar. A sacrifice in which the offering was burned completely on an altar. Now, it's also called the Shoah. Now, the Shoah means catastrophe, right? Or Hoban, which means destruction. But they call it the Holocaust. Everybody, you've never heard of Shoah, I reckon, or even
Correct.
Herbert, I'm sure.
No.
But you all heard Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
So why Holocaust? Why that word? Anyway, I don't want to dwell too much on this. It's quite morbid.
Well, if mentioning the Holocaust, and I've just done it now, gets you banned off YouTube, I think we'll be up there.
I'm not denying the Holocaust.
No, we're not. No, we're not. No. That's right.
I've been to Bergen-Belsen, and I've been to Buchenwald when I was in high school in Germany. You had to go. That's a sombering place there, I tell you what. And I've spoken to Holocaust survivors. Right? I have regular people, right, that still lived when I was a child in school. So as part of our school, I guess, curriculum, you would interview these people as part of history, right? And then you just. In fact, I entered a competition. There was Germany-wide, and I won a book. Or my friend and I won a book because we interviewed quite a few people in the neighborhood, and we put that together and then wrote a little paper on it, I think, and we were given a prize, which was a book, which is great, I thought. But anyway, I've got to find it here somewhere. It was about Berlin in ruins and the reconstruction of Berlin, etc., etc. But I still had my own family that came close to going to Auschwitz for various things, including not joining the Nazi party. So it happened. Dave and I wouldn't deny it. I mean, it's foolish to, because, again, what are the percentages here, right? I mean, you've got to think about these things. Germany were the first. I mean, everybody has asked me. Eastern Europe and other places as well. Killing of Jews was almost like a hobby, right? I mean, people were killing Jews because they were easy targets. They were gypsies, but it was really the Jewish people that were prosecuted the most, because they were visibly different and obviously different, and they weren't transient like gypsies. So transients would just pack up and go, whereas Jews tend to settle, right? And once you settle, they become a you become a target, an easier target once you become part of the population, right? And especially if you're so different, right? Visually different. Don't celebrate Christmas, things like that, right? But in Germany they didn't do that. They didn't really prosecute them prior to the Nazis taking control. Not really, right? So what we are faced with here is this deep question as to how much, and this is important because World War II changed everything, how much of that history is steeped in the occult, in things that we're told, don't look at that. Dave, stop looking at that. Dave, stop it. What are you doing? Are you still looking, Dave?
I put Vaseline on my glasses. I can't see it, I promise you.
So whenever you're coming across something that might pique your interest, right? Whenever. And people tell you no. What do you mean? No, we don't want to look at that. Oh, why? Oh, yeah, no. and that goes. No, I'm serious. The study of anti-gravity, right? It's complete radio silence for 50 years. Complete.
That's right.
What happened? I don't know. Where's my flying car? The occult or the unseen universe, if you will. You know, the forces that we would describe as magical or metaphysical. Right? No, don't look at that. That's complete nonsense. Really? Now let's be clear here. Ronald Reagan had an astrologer. That's right. Did. Right? And a lot of statesmen and women rely on higher powers to make the decision. Be it God, which is a higher power and metaphysical, right? Or some other agency, astrology, or the I Ching, or whatever your particular flavor is. I don't really care, right? A lot of people do rely on it, and the crazy thing, because of the nature of the universe we're in, which is quantum, seems to be fundamentally, those systems of prophecy and clairvoyance, let's call it loosely, actually work. I myself was a practitioner of the tarot. I used to write a weight deck. Again, not so you're thinking I'm BSing you. I used to write a weight deck. Now, I haven't touched it in 20 years. And I haven't touched it because I saw someone's death, which then came to pass. But I don't want to say it freaked me out, but it made me very wary.
As
Stephen
Wright once said, I got a full house and 4 people died.
Nice. And you see, once you, and it's been in my family for, I guess, generations. My grandmother was good at astrology. My mom was good at cards. My grandmother did cards as well. I think my uncle did palms. I can read palms. Don't ask me how. I just can. Right?
I can read a teacup, but not the tea leaves. I don't read the tea leaves.
So yeah, people have it or they don't, and that's okay, right? You never know until you try, and well, actually, it'll compel you to do it. If you have it, you feel compelled. But the point is this: that these systems of advice, let's call it, these systems of information, seem to work. They seem to work. Some are very generalized. I mean, if you look at the astrological page in the newspaper, that's complete nonsense, right? Because it's too broad. But if you have a specific thing, then, or a specific person, then you can be pretty precise. I remember Michael Palin was doing his, in 1988, he did an 80 Days Around the World, right? So it was his first ever travel show. He's an actor, comedian, right? He'd never done a travel show before, and I don't think he would ever do one since, he thought, because that was pretty horrendous. Not horrendous, but it was quite harrowing. I mean, he went around the world in 80 days. It's not that easy. But he went to Singapore, and he went to the Raffles Hotel, and in the Raffles Hotel they had a I did. He went to the astrologer, who was actually the astrologer of the hotel, like in the hotel's employ, if you will, right? And the reason he went to him is because he had one of his friends, one of the Python gang, had asked him, "Oh, can you bring back, please, a chart for my child, which will be born on this and this day?" And so that's what he did. Don't know what it said for the child, except that the child is going to be autistic or something. I can't remember, but it doesn't really matter. Anyway, but he also had himself, or his journey, or all that, had a chart made for himself. And I remember that. And that the astrologer, very calmly and quite, I guess, without any doubt, said, "Yeah, this is going to be the first of many journeys like this. You will do you will for the rest of your life you will do this." And I don't look, Michael Palin, again, actor, comedian, was probably thinking, "Yeah, look, I'll do this one, and maybe I'll do another couple, but I'm not gonna any more than that." I think he's now the most well-traveled travel presenter ever. He's been virtually everywhere. He's been from pole to pole. He's been up and down. He's been around and around. He's done. I think it's like 10 or 15 or something shows. The latest one, I think, from him was Iraq. I think he went Iran. He went to Iran or I can't remember. And he's done a lot. He's done a phenomenal amount of travel shows. In one of them, he was in Africa and he met. Help me.
Narrow it down. There's a few Africans.
British journalist who's now very much talking about ancient civilizations and such. And
Michael
he had
Tellinger?
debate with Zahi Hawass.
Was that Tellinger?
Not Tellinger. No, not Tellinger. Oh boy!
Oh, the one that just released his
show.
Just then,
where Hawass didn't know about Göbekli Tepe.
That's right. Yeah.
Him. Anyway, so he met him in Africa on the road. It was a complete coincidence, right? And this was back in the early 90s. And he said that, look, I'm really interested in this stuff. Some really interesting stuff going on, with these mythology and the stuff. He goes, oh, really? Oh, yeah. And he was that guy also was a journalist for the BBC. That's how they knew each other, right? And I can't think of his name. Saved my life.
So he just had that documentary series, right?
Yeah. That's him. That's him.
He's been on Joe Rogan.
Yes. He's and I like him because he's very measured. He speaks very well and he doesn't get flustered.
That's right.
And for the life of me, I do apologize, sir, but I cannot remember your name right now.
That's okay.
But the point is that Palin did indeed travel the world and still does, because it was a very specific astrological chart for him. So ignoring our abilities to prophesize and at least glean into the future is detrimental. We should not ignore it because we have the ability to at least see some things that are moving in the future. And the thing is this, my grandmother said this: the future does not force you, right? It will only bend your way. Die Zukunft zwingt nicht, sie neigt sich. Okay, which means, like I said, the future doesn't force you to do anything, but there are certain paths which are more likely than others. Right?
Someone said you're going to travel. You might make decisions when their decisions come up that favor it or not, right? Correct. So that's one way of leading the witness. But I'll tell you that my future, and I believe all time is in a box. It's already happened, and if you're yet to experience it, and all those crossroads are valid, and all of those things are true when it's done correctly. When my mother saw that there was a drowning at Lane Cove National Park, and that she saw me there. Graham Hancock, that's right. So when she saw me there and a drowning, and assumed it was me, and she refused to let me go. Eventually, I snuck there some 5 years or more later, 10 years. And when I went there, it was lucky that I was there because I saved my friend's sister from drowning. And it was the very next time I went. And I refused so many times. I just can't go. And they go, why? And I can't say. And eventually I caved and went, and just lucky, right? Very lucky to have been there and saw it happening and was able to intervene. I think it's really important not to attempt to avoid something at all costs. Just be aware of it as foreknowledge. If these are disastrous things, I see a death, right? Cool. All right, well, be very careful to ensure that you do take care of you or someone else. Like when I was at Bathurst, I saw what looked like my car written off, but it wasn't. It was just like twisted metal. It turns out it was a motorcycle, and I'd already started looking and making contact with people on Facebook Marketplace to buy a new car with the money that I would get from my insurance company because my car was written off. But it wasn't my car. And it was the next day in the morning, like less than 12 hours notice. But I did see it in advance. And it was wow, right? So I am absolutely in favor of there being a way to see the future, even others to see yours. And I'm right on board with all of this stuff that can't be measured. Can't be measured. There's no science. You know, at Montauk, they experimented with all of these things, right? That of things that we know today. But Mackie, I did want to take it back to the text. While I've got the talking stick, I thought we might, since we've given a good deal of background into this now, right? So what was it at the time around the esotericism in Germany and Austria, and even influences from before 1880? Mackie, you can start.
Oh, sure. So look, large influences at that time. There's a few. One of them were the Knights Templar. The original Knights Templar were founded around 1119, so well over 1,000 years from today. And there had been a crusading military order that at some time had established a financial network across the whole of Christendom, believe it or not, and so almost like the world's first bankers. In 1307, King Philip IV of France mounted a slanderous campaign to strip the order of its economic and political influence. The Templars were accused of satanic practices, perversions, and blasphemy, and ruthlessly suppressed. Its leaders were burned on March 18, 1314. The circumstances of the suppression gave rise to the legends surrounding the Knights Templar, of course. In Germany, where the growth of deviant Masonic rites was greatest, the Templar heritage was adopted for irregular Freemasonry. Freemasonry had officially been founded in England in 1717. The idea of chivalric Freemasonry first occurred circa 1737 in France. In 1775, Baron Gotthelf von Hund founded the Order of Strict Observance, claiming the possession of secret Templar documents, which allegedly proved that his order represented the legal Templar succession. Dave?
Wow. Rosicrucian, my grandmother was connected to this, Mackie, a member of. In the 17th century, but no, my grandmother wasn't alive back then. This is to do with Germany and Austria. In the 17th century and the 18th century, Rosicrucian ideas flourished in varying degrees. Rosicrucianism goes back to the beginning of the 17th century, where 3 works by Johann Valentin Andrea were printed at Kassel. One of these works, the Chemische Hochzeit, appears to be an alchemical tract. Alchemical tract. While the other 2, for which the authorship of Valentin André is not finally proven, announce the existence of the Rosicrucian order, which desires a universal and general reformation of the whole world. Putatively, this order was founded by Christian Rosenkreutz, who is supposed to have lived from 1378 to 1484. Mackie, that's extraordinary that's around the same period. I wonder where they lived. In either 1747 or 1757, a quasi-Masonic Rosicrucian order of the name Gold und Rosenbrews was founded in Berlin, having a 9-grade hierarchy based on the Kabbalistic tree of life, This organization included King Frederick William II of Prussia and Johann Christoph von Waller as members.
Which brings us to the German occult revival from the 1880s to 1910. We spent some time discussing this with regard to Madame Blavatsky, but the modern German occult revival owes its inception to the popularity of theosophy in the Anglo-Saxon world. Again, Blavatsky. Now, theosophy. The first German Theosophical Society was established in July of 1884 under the presidency of Wilhelm Hübke Schleiden, a conservative German nationalist turned spiritual seeker who sought to establish theosophy on a scientific basis. Between 1886 and 1895, Hübke Schleiden published the monthly periodical The Sphinx, which is the Sphinx. In Vienna, a Theosophical Society was founded in 1887. Its president was Friedrich Eckstein. Among his circle at this time was Franz Hartmann, a leader of the Theosophical work who emphasized personal spiritual experience, and the young Rudolf Steiner were also members. Remember Rudolf Steiner? There's actually Rudolf Steiner House in Sydney, believe it or not. A German Theosophical Society as a branch of the International Theosophical Brotherhood then was established in 1896 when the American Theosophists around William Quan Judge, Catherine Tingley, E.T. Hargrove, and C.F. Wright traveled through Europe. Its president was Franz Hartmann, who also founded a Theosophical lay monastery at Ascona in 1889. His periodical Lotusblüten, which is lotus blossoms, was the first German publication to use the Theosophical swastika on its cover. Hartmann's example provided the impetus for Paul Zillmann to found the Metaphysische Rundschau, which was the Metaphysical Review, in 1896. Rudolf Steiner was made General Secretary of the German Theosophical Society in 1902. Steiner, who was seeking to develop an esoteric path suitable for the modern era and professed commitment to scientific methodology, was yet oriented towards awakening spiritual experiences in each individual rather than depending upon authorities or gurus. He published Lucifer in Berlin from 1903 to 1908. In Vienna, there also existed an association for occultism connected to a person called Philip Maschlowski. From 1903, he published a periodical called Die Gnosis. It was later absorbed by Rudolf Steiner's periodical Lucifer and renamed Lucifer Gnosis, or Luciferian Gnosis. It's a loaded term. It may have been a desire to counter Steiner's influence in the occult subculture, which led Hartmann to encourage the publication of several new periodicals. A Theosophical publishing house was established by Hugo Vollrath in Leipzig in 1906. Among the magazines published there was Prana, 1919, initially edited by Karl Brandler-Pracht and later edited by Johannes Balzli. Before that, a publisher with the name Wilhelm Friedrich had already published the works of Hartmann and Hübke Schleiden, as well as translations of the English Theosophists at Leipzig. Wilhelm Friedrich had also published the occult works of Max Ferdinand Sebald von Werth. Initially, this author had collaborated with Moritz von Egedy on the periodical Das angewandte Christentum, which means applied Christianity, but later he wrote volumes on the Sexualreligion of the Aryans, thus, in the opinion of Gottfried Clark, anticipating Ariosophy. Dave?
This brings us to anthroposy. Anthroposy. No, I'll get it. Anthroposophy. There we go. From 1907, at latest, tensions between Rudolf Steiner and the Theosophical Society grew steadily. In 1912, Rudolf Steiner broke away to found Anthroposophy. There were two causes of the break. Steiner's European and Christian orientation had long been distinct from the Hinduistic interest of the Theosophists under the leadership of Annie Besant. More immediately, Steiner publicly distanced himself from Besant's promotion of Jiddu Krishnamurti as a supposed new messiah. Steiner and a group of prominent German theosophists officially founded the Anthroposophical Society in December 1913. The vast majority of German membership of the Theosophical Society following them into the new group. The breakaways were excluded from the Theosophical Society in January 1914.
The next one is yours.
It's mine as well.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah, good on you. Okay. Guido von List and Georges Lanz von Liebenfels. Living in Vienna. I think you just like the way I mispronounce everything. Living in Vienna, Guido von List, 1848 to 1919, had been, tell me I'm wrong, had been active as journalist and writer, not a journalist. After he turned to esotericism, he became the first popular author to combine Volscic ideology and occultism into the type of esoteric doctrine that is now collectively labeled Ariosophy. In September 1903, the occult periodical Diagnosis, we've already mentioned, included an article by List in which he, referring Sobold von Werth, stated to articulate a Germanic occult religion. In the following decade, List continued to work on this topic, also making references to the works of Madame Blavatsky and William Scott Elliot. In his concept of Armanism, the religion of the theocratic elite in his image of the ancient Germanic past, List borrowed material from Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. Since his manuscript proposing the research into the runes by the means of occult insight was rejected from the Imperial Academy of Sciences in Vienna, the supporters of List formed a List Society, Guido von List Gesellschaft, to finance his research. The society was founded officially on the 2nd of March 1908. Well, that was Tunguska year.
That's right.
Its members included Volscics, authors, as well as occultists, for example, Franz Hartmann, and the complete membership of the Vienna Theosophical Society. Some inner members of the List Society participated in the activities of the Hohe Armanen Orden, which is the High Armanen Order. This order, however, achieved no significance as a lodge-like organization. Georg Lanz von Liebenfels, 1874 to 1954, had been a Cistercian monk between 1893 and 1899. In 1903, he published a long article, Anthropozoon Biblicum, in... Oh, you just take that big long one there, Mackie.
Just trying to... You're excellent. Christians. Okay. Vierteljahresschrift für Bibelkunde.
Thank you. You make it sound effortless. The periodical for biblical research, in other words. By 1905, his studies in this direction had accumulated into the book Theozoology, a strange amalgam of traditional Judeo-Christian sources and contemporary life sciences. Among other things, Lanz proposed a, quote, frequently obscene and always radical, unquote, interpretation of the Bible, according to which it had been the purpose of the Old Testament to warn the Aryan race against interbreeding with pygmies. In 1905, Lanz also established his own magazine, Ostara. One of the few other contributions to this magazine besides Lanz himself was the theosophist Harold Gravel von Jostennude, I probably pronounced that incorrectly too, 1856 to 1932, who also edited one number of Lotsoblüten.
Oh yeah, that's it. Crazy. Other developments, I think we'll get that in.
Your time starts now.
And Vienna cult, also rather occult subculture, was well developed before the First World War. Aside from the developments mentioned above, there are some more of interest. The Ordo Templi Orientis, OTO, originated in the irregular Masonic activities of Theodor Reuss, Franz Hartmann, and Karl Kellner between 1895 and 1906. Theodor Reuss had been in contact with William Westcott, a founding member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. In 1928, Fraternitas Saturni split off from OTO. Ernst Wachler was a Völkisch author. He supported the Guido von List Society, who had founded an open-air Germanic theater in the Harz Mountains. This theater, called Green Stage, was closed in 1937. The Germanische Glaubensgemeinschaft, founded in 1907, is claimed by current Germanic neo-paganism groups as predecessor. It was founded and led by the painter Ludwig Fahrenkrog. Since 1908, the group used the swastika as its symbol. After 1938, the use of the swastika became prohibited and the group was no longer allowed to hold public meetings. However, unlike many other esoteric groups in Nazi Germany, the GGG was not forced to disband, partly because of Fahrenkrog's international status as an artist. Now, but something important here, and I'm not sure we can actually finish the next one, but just something important here is the fact that in 37, 38, which is really when the Nazis came into the swing of things, right? The Kristallnacht, when they smashed all the Jewish shop windows, was in 1938. But they shut down all of these esoteric or occult societies. Now, they might not have disbanded all of them, but they were no longer really allowed to do anything. They might still exist in name, but for all intents and purposes, they were no longer active. Right? And that's really telling. It really feels like Hitler was shutting down all the competition. Right? He was shutting down all the people that might have understood what he was doing and might have, become alarmed potentially.
Well, they also had a counter historical argument.
Yeah.
And he didn't want that.
Not.
No, his story was meant to be the only story.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So he was shutting them down as I guess competition, even though they might be moving in the same direction.
Yeah, that also confused me. But he stole a swastika and then not just banned them from using it, but just shut them down entirely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's mine now. Yoink.
Yeah, pretty much. What? What do you mean it's yours? How can it be yours? It's a swastika. It's just anyone's, isn't it? Can't we just all get along?
You sure you don't want to just make up a symbol? No, that one's perfect. Yeah, right.
So, but look, it is really interesting, and we've seen this before. You shut down the counter-revolutionaries before they can, bring you down. I mean, it happened in all the revolutions, with the exception maybe of the American Revolution. All the people that could cause you trouble because they knew how to were shut down completely.
So all the ones that helped you get there,
yeah,
to the revolution were shut down. Yeah,
yeah, and because, I mean, they were useful then, and no, not so much. It's a really interesting situation when you look at history, and just you look at how people work together, and then the next day they're just killing each other, because that's just what happens. Just human nature.
It's the start of the time.
Yeah, that's right. It was the best of time. It was the
blurst of time.
Times. What?
Continue the research.
It's really, I don't know. History always repeats itself, because I think honestly there are only so many patterns we can truly form in this reality. There's only so many patterns, so many outcomes that are possible, right?
Yeah.
That in effect that are allowed to happen. I want to go as far as saying, and so this is like it's on repeat. You look at history, you become a student of history, and you see these things going on, and you, oh, hang on, that happened before. Oh no, that's exactly what happened here.
Oh no, Mickey, it's different this time. Is it?
But I actually experienced this in a microcosmos at work.
Better hurry. There's the music.
Music. I'll share it some other time with you guys.
This has been yet again another Shiny Side Out with Dave, thankfully, and Mecky. That's where the thank comes in. And you know what? We'll see you for midweek for Plato's Cave, Tuesday and Thursday mornings in the US. And the music seems to have stopped for some reason. And we'll see you again next week for another Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mecky. Take care, everyone.